So the biggest thing I've been thinking about lately in our space is cypherpunk values and what's going on with privacy coins, and but also just sort of what our industry is about and how it's changed lately. Yes, I have my giant hat on. It is getting cold now, but I'm not happy with a lot of the focus in our industry lately. Stable coins that are based on fiat are completely uninteresting. It's just fiat. And fiat sucks. Fiat is, and I don't use the word lightly, fiat is evil. Why is fiat evil? Because it leads to all kinds of evil. Printing money from thin air without consequence is like giving a flamethrower to a toddler. You put that power in the hands of politicians who, in case this is news for you, politicians are not the greatest people because the old saying, power corrupts. If you have the power to print money from thin air, even the best people are not going to care about that money the same as they would their own money. And it will inevitably and always lead to corruption at best. In addition, it will lead to things like mass murder, wars of aggression, for-profit prisons, domestic surveillance by the government, all kinds of horrible things that come from fiat. So fiat's evil, and it's terrible. And putting it in another wrapper so it moves a little easier is not interesting at all. Who cares? Stablecoins are not interesting, and they're nothing to do with cypherpunk values. They don't make the world better. They help a system called fiat, which makes the world worse, which is responsible for most of the horrible things in the world. If you look at the horrible things in the world, and I asked 100 people what the top 10 worst things in the world are, you're going to get some different answers. You're going to get a lot of things related to war, violence, destruction, authoritarianism, even things like healthcare and obesity, junk science, stupid, weird, woke, abuse of children, all kinds of crime, lack of property, respect of property. All of these things relate right back to fiat. So fiat's evil. Stablecoins are not interesting. And centralization being a focus. So what's happened is there's a lot of early OGs who, as I've said before, people are older. The space is, 14 years older than it was when it started. Yep, the dock is gone. Hopefully not washed away. Wow. Even with this new microphone, this wind might be too much. With the old microphone, it would be totally unusable. So my dock is gone. It's a 90% chance that is because they moved the dock. One year it just went away and I said, there goes some money. And I was amazingly lucky. It washed ashore and we were able to save it. The early Bitcoiners, it was a completely political movement in the early days. I found out about Bitcoin at an anarchist festival called PorkFest. Roger Ver, Charlie Shrem, and Eric Voorhees gave a speech about Bitcoin. They were onboarded by another, or at least Roger I think was the first, and he was onboarded by another libertarian. It was all libertarians, all. All people similar politics to me. I was an outlier in the early days of Bitcoin. I got to pull up the old post. There was a post on Reddit and somebody said, we don't need you suit-wearing statist, because I had come from the TradFi world. And now I'm considered an outlier on the other way. They're like, oh, he's the crazy libertarian, the token OG guy, still believes in that crazy freedom stuff. Let's let Bruce on the stage at one of these events for old time's sake. And the vast majority of the space is a bunch of statists now. There's very few people who have these ideals. And if that makes you comfortable, you're in the wrong place. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's evolved and changed. No, it hasn't evolved. It's devolved. This is a political movement. The movement was, and if you listen to Satoshi himself, the movement in the early days and the entire founding of it was about disintermediation and getting rid of centralized powers and tearing down the power structures of centralized banks and central banks and the bankster money frauds and fiat games that have gone on for decades to the tune of millions dead and all kinds of tyranny. It's a movement designed to break that by putting the power in the hands of the people and the power in the hands of math and code and predictable rules rather than the whims of politicians sitting in offices paid for by money that they stole from you. And as it's become more and more mainstream, you have people who just don't even understand, they don't appreciate these values, and they think it's silly. And these are the same people who are wrong all the time. They're wrong about everything on both sides. Uniparty statists. And so the early days, it was all liberty people, ANCAPs. And it was only by like 2013, maybe even 2014, when it started becoming more kind of mainstream. I remember it was April 2013. I was sitting in an A16, I think they was called Andreessen Horowitz back then, an Andreessen Horowitz A16Z summit in San Francisco. And I was sitting with a friend who was a real OG. He came in, 4 years before me, or 3 years, whatever. The very, very earliest you could come in. He was like, it's funny, he had, there was posts on Reddit where he was doing OTC trades and he's doing like 100,000 Bitcoin trades. Like, okay, yeah, I got the 100,000. I think he even did trades with Hal Finney and stuff. I got the 100, let me send you 50 back. So he was sitting next to me. Oh, good, the doc is here. I thought that they had taken it out and just put it on the side rather than washed away. But you never know in this weather. It changes quick. You'll see no boats today. I wouldn't want to be in a boat. But Mark Andreessen was on stage and he said, my least favorite phrase. I hope he didn't say adults in the room. That's one of my least favorite phrases. But he said something similar. We need the adults in the room. We need more regulation. And my super OG friend next to me, he just shakes his head. He said, man, a year or two ago, if he said that out loud, somebody in the audience would be like, F you, Andreessen! And that's true. I went to some of those early events, and it was completely all ANCAPs. It was all people talking about, they were talking about things like, normal speeches were talking about things like, end the Fed, destroy the banks, destroy the system, break the old system down, it's all corrupt, it's all broken. That was what normal ones. The fringe ones were talking about things like assassination markets. And today, the normal panels are talking about centralized treasury strategies and kissing up to bankers. And the fringe ones are talking about, well, maybe we can disrupt a little bit of the Fed. And that's a shame. It's not what the space is about. And I say this as, there's two hats that I wear. I wear the hat as a liberty ANCAP activist who wants human freedom, who wants the government out of our lives and out of our wallets, and who believes that the maximum role of government is the protection of life, liberty, and property. And that's it. And go away. Leave us alone with your stupid KYC, AML, getting up in our business, you busybody, nanny state, violent, authoritarian, murderous thugs. Get the hell out of our lives and go home. That's the activist side of me. And then there's the investor side of me, which is all about making money. And I don't blend the two because that will harm your money making. You do have ethics in the money that you make. You say there's certain things that you don't do, certain things you don't support. But other than that, you don't let your activism enslave your investment philosophy. So as a pure, obviously as an activist, I want the Bitcoin cypherpunk values. But as an investor too, it's a bad investment. If we lose our decentralization, we lose our roots, we lose our ANCAP cypherpunk values, this stuff is worth nothing. If we centralize it, then all we are is Beanie Babies and collectibles, and it is absolutely worthless. Decentralize or lose.